The snow fell heavily outside, covering the street in a soft white blanket. The wind howled like a lonely cry, rattling the old windows of Amir's small apartment. Inside, Amir sat quietly at his wooden table, a cup of tea growing cold beside him. He had grown used to nights like these, nights of silence and routine. He was a simple man with a simple life. He worked at a small bookstore during the day and spent his evenings reading or listening to the radio. His world was quiet, sometimes too quiet, but safe. He never expected anything unusual to happen to him. He liked order, and he trusted the safety of the familiar. But that night was different. It was late, almost midnight, when the sound came. At first he thought it was the wind banging against the door, but then he heard it again, sharp, hurried knocks. He froze. No one ever came to his apartment at that hour. His building was old, the neighbors were quiet, and most people kept to themselves. The knock grew louder, desperate. Amir felt a chill run down his spine. For a moment he thought of ignoring it, but then a voice broke through the storm outside. "Please, please open the door," the voice cried. It was a woman's voice, weak and trembling.
"If you don't let me in, I'll die."
"You're my only hope." Amir's hand shook as he placed his teacup on the table. He hesitated, staring at the door as if it were a wall between safety and danger. In his mind, warnings echoed. He remembered news stories about people pretending to be in need only to trick others. He thought of his late father's advice: never open the door to strangers at night. Yet the voice outside sounded so desperate, so full of pain, that it pierced his cautious heart. He moved slowly to the door, pressing his ear against it. He could hear shallow, shivering breaths. He imagined someone standing out there, freezing in the storm, maybe close to collapse. The knock came again, weaker this time. Amir knew that if he did nothing, someone might die outside his door. His fear battled with his sense of humanity. Finally, his compassion won. He unlatched the lock and opened the door a crack. The cold wind rushed in, biting his skin. Standing in the doorway was a woman. Snow clung to her hair and clothes, her lips were blue and her eyes wide with exhaustion. She looked as though she had been walking in the storm for hours. She held her arms around herself, shivering uncontrollably. "Please," she whispered again, her voice nearly breaking. Amir hesitated for only a second longer before opening the door wider and stepping aside. "Come in," he said softly. She stumbled forward into the warmth, nearly falling, but Amir caught her by the arm and guided her to the couch. Her body shook as though her bones were made of ice. Amir hurried to fetch a thick blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders. He boiled water for tea, his mind racing with questions. Who was she? Why was she outside in such weather? And why had she chosen his door out of all the others? When he returned, she was sitting quietly, clutching the blanket like it was her lifeline. Her eyes darted around the room as if checking every corner. Amir offered her the cup of tea and she took it with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved me." Amir gave her a small nod but didn't ask questions right away. He could see she was still fighting the cold. Her fingers shook too much to hold the cup steady, so he gently steadied it for her. For a few minutes, silence filled the room, broken only by the sound of the storm outside and her uneven breathing. Finally, Amir spoke. "You should rest. The storm will pass soon." But the woman shook her head. "No, I can't rest. They'll find me if I stop." Her eyes filled with fear as she said the words, and Amir's chest tightened. He had expected to hear a simple story, maybe about being lost or stuck in the storm, but her words hinted at something deeper, something darker. "Who will find you?" Amir asked carefully. The woman looked at him, her eyes full of exhaustion and desperation. She opened her mouth to answer, but her body gave way. She collapsed sideways on the couch, her cup falling to the floor. Amir rushed forward, setting the cup aside before it spilled. He checked her breathing, still steady but weak. She had fainted, her body too tired to keep fighting. Amir sat back, staring at her pale face. She seemed young, maybe in her late 20s. There were faint marks on her wrists, as if she had been tied or grabbed too hard. His mind filled with questions, but there were no answers. He felt torn between fear and responsibility. If she was in danger, then maybe he was now in danger too. But looking at her fragile form, wrapped in his blanket, he knew he could not throw her back into the storm. He stood by the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peek out. Snow swirled in the street, covering everything in white. But through the blur, he thought he saw movement. Shadows shifting near the lamppost across the road. He quickly closed the curtain, his heart pounding. Behind him, the woman stirred. Her lips moved, and in a faint whisper, she spoke a name. Amir froze. The name was familiar. He had heard it before. Years ago, connected to something dangerous. It was the name of a man whose reputation spread through news and whispers alike. Amir's chest tightened as he realized this stranger on his couch was somehow tied to a story much larger than a snowy night. The storm outside grew louder, rattling the windows as if echoing Amir's own fear. He looked at the woman again, her face peaceful in sleep, and felt the weight of the choice he had made. By opening his door, he had stepped into something he did not yet understand. And yet, deep in his heart, he knew he could not undo it. That snowy night was no longer ordinary. It was the beginning of something that would test his courage, his trust, and his very sense of what was safe and what was right. Amir sat down in his chair, unable to sleep, his eyes fixed on the door. Somewhere out there in the snow, danger waited, and inside his apartment, wrapped in his blanket, lay the woman who had brought it to his doorstep. The morning light crept slowly into the small apartment, touching the edges of the old curtains and spreading a pale glow across the room. The storm outside had calmed, but snow still lay heavy on the streets like a thick white sheet. Amir had not slept much. He spent most of the night sitting in his chair, keeping an eye on the stranger who now rested on his couch. The woman had fainted after whispering that strange name, a name that still echoed in Amir's mind. He couldn't shake the uneasy feeling it brought. When she stirred, Amir leaned forward. Her eyelids fluttered open and she looked around the room with wide eyes as if trying to remember where she was. For a moment, she seemed ready to panic. But then she saw the blanket around her shoulders and the warm cup of tea that Amir had placed on the table. Her body relaxed slightly. "You're safe," Amir said softly, his voice calm but steady. "You were outside last night. You fainted. I brought you in." The woman blinked, then whispered, "Thank you." Her voice was still weak, but there was a deep sincerity in it. Amir nodded, though his mind was restless. He wanted to ask questions, but he waited. He brought her a piece of bread and some warm milk. She ate slowly, almost carefully, as if she had not eaten properly in days. Amir studied her face while she ate. There was something in her eyes, fear mixed with determination. He wondered what kind of life could leave a young woman at a stranger's door on such a night. After a while, she spoke again. "I am Layla," she said softly, avoiding his gaze. "Amir," he replied simply. He waited, giving her space. Layla pulled the blanket tighter around her. I didn't mean to involve you. I had nowhere else to go. If you hadn't opened the door, She stopped, her lips trembling. Amir could hear the rest of her sentence in his mind. She would have died in the snow. The thought unsettled him. He wanted to ask why she had been outside, but he felt she wasn't ready yet. So instead, he said, "You don't have to explain everything now. Just rest, you're safe here." But Layla shook her head. "No, I cannot rest. If I stop moving, they will catch me." Her words made Amir uneasy. He leaned back in his chair, watching her carefully. "Who will catch you?" he asked gently. She hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the window. "People I trusted once, they want something from me, something I found. If they know I'm here, you could be in danger too." Her tone was quiet, but every word carried weight. Amir's heart beat faster. He remembered the movement he had seen outside the night before, the shadow under the lamppost. Maybe it wasn't just his imagination. "What did you find?" Amir asked. Layla's fingers tightened around the blanket. "Proof, papers, things they don't want anyone to see. I kept them hidden." She reached into her small bag and pulled out an envelope, old and slightly worn. She held it close, almost like a treasure. "This is why they're after me." Amir stared at the envelope. He wanted to ask more, but the fear in her voice told him not to push too hard. Instead, he asked, "Why not go to the police?" Layla shook her head quickly. "No, some of them are involved. If I go to the police, they will hand me back. I cannot risk it." Her words sank into Amir's mind like cold water. If she was telling the truth, then this was no ordinary problem. He had accidentally stepped into something dangerous. Yet looking at her pale face and trembling hands, he knew he could not turn her away now. A sudden sound made both of them freeze. Knocks echoed in the stairwell outside. They weren't at Amir's door, but they were close. Voices followed, low, polite, but too sharp to be casual. "Excuse me, have you seen a young woman? Dark hair, wearing a gray coat?" Amir's heart pounded. He looked at Layla. Her eyes were wide with terror. She pressed a finger to her lips and whispered, "Don't let them see me." Quickly, she pulled the blanket over her head and slipped down behind the couch, curling into a small shadow. The knocking came closer, now on the neighbor's door. Amir moved to his own door and listened. A man's voice, polite but firm, repeated the same description. The neighbor answered, "No, haven't seen anyone." The footsteps moved again, and soon they stopped in front of Amir's apartment. A knock followed, sharp and confident. Amir's chest tightened. He had a choice: ignore it and raise suspicion, or answer it and risk being caught in a lie. He took a deep breath and opened the door slightly. A tall man stood in the hallway. He wore a neat coat, his shoes polished even though the streets were covered in snow. His smile was polite, but his eyes were too sharp. "Good morning," the man said smoothly. "Sorry to disturb you. We're looking for someone, a young woman, dark hair, gray coat. Have you seen her?" Amir shook his head quickly. "No, I haven't seen anyone." The man studied him for a long moment as if weighing his words. Then he gave a small nod. "If you do, please let us know." He handed Amir a card with a phone number and a name that made Amir's stomach twist. It was the same name Layla had whispered before collapsing. When the man left, Amir shut the door quickly and locked it. His hands shook as he leaned against the wood, trying to calm his racing heart. Layla peeked out from behind the couch, her face pale. "That's him," she whispered. "He won't stop until he gets what he wants." Amir swallowed hard. "And now he knows you might be close." Layla nodded. "I shouldn't have come here." "I put you in danger." Amir looked at her, seeing the despair in her eyes. He thought about sending her away, telling her to find another place to hide. But deep inside he knew he could not do that. She had knocked on his door because she had no one else. "No," Amir said firmly. "You're here now. And I won't let them take you." Layla's eyes filled with tears, not just of fear but of gratitude. She opened the envelope slightly, showing Amir a photograph inside. An image of the man who had just knocked on the door, standing with a group of others, all dressed in suits. Beneath the photo was a list of numbers and names. "This is what they don't want the world to see," she whispered. "If you help me, we can stop them. But it will not be easy." Amir stared at the photograph, his mind spinning. He realized that his quiet life had changed forever. He had opened the door to a stranger, and now he was caught in a storm much larger than the one outside. The sound of the man's footsteps still echoed in his ears, reminding him that danger was only a wall away. But in that moment, Amir knew he could not turn back. He nodded slowly. "Tell me everything." The night passed with heavy silence, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the wall. Amir sat near the window, watching the snowy streets, while Layla lay curled on the couch, clutching the envelope to her chest. Every sound outside made them both tense. The crunch of boots in the snow, the distant slam of a door, even the barking of a stray dog. Amir felt as though his safe little world had cracked open. The name that Layla had whispered, the face on the photograph, and the knock on his door all swirled inside his mind. He knew life would never be the same. When the morning arrived, the world outside looked calm and quiet, as though nothing had happened. But Amir felt no peace. He turned to Layla, who was awake and staring at the ceiling. Her eyes were filled with a sadness that seemed too heavy for someone so young. "You said last night that you found proof." Amir began carefully. "I need to know what this is really about. If I'm going to help you, I must understand." Layla sat up slowly, her fingers brushing the edges of the envelope. She hesitated, as if speaking the truth might make the danger more real. Finally, she said, "I used to work for a charity. At first I believed in it. We helped families, children, people who had nothing. I thought I was making a difference. But then I discovered numbers that didn't make sense. Money came in from donors, but it didn't reach the people. It vanished. When I looked deeper, I found documents, names, accounts. The man you saw yesterday. He is one of them. He runs it from the shadows." Amir felt a cold weight in his chest. "And they know you found out?" "Yes," Layla whispered. "I thought I was careful, but someone saw me copying files. Since then, they have followed me. I couldn't go home. I couldn't trust anyone. That's why I was out in the snow last night. I kept moving until I couldn't anymore. You were the first person to open the door." Her words sank into Amir's heart. He looked at the photograph again. The man's sharp eyes, the polished suit, the group of powerful-looking people beside him. It was not just about missing money. It was about power, corruption, and control. What do you plan to do? Amir asked. Layla took a deep breath. There is one person who might help. A reporter. He has been writing about corruption for years. If he gets this envelope, he can make it public. But I can't reach him alone. They watch me too closely. Amir thought about it. He had read some of those articles before, stories that had exposed lies and forced the truth into the light. The reporter was known for bravery, but also for being targeted. If they went to him, it could mean even greater danger, yet it might be the only way to end this. All right, Amir said finally. We'll go to him. But we have to be careful. Layla nodded. Her face was pale, but there was a spark of hope in her eyes. They spent the day preparing. Amir found an old backpack where Layla could hide the envelope and a few belongings. He gave her a scarf and hat to cover her face. He himself wore his heaviest coat and pulled the hood low. They avoided turning on lights, keeping the apartment dim. From time to time, Amir peered through the curtains, scanning the street below. Once, he thought he saw a dark car idling near the corner, but when he looked again, it was gone. As evening came, the streets grew quieter. They decided it was safer to move after dark. The snow still covered the ground, muffling their footsteps, though it made walking harder. Amir and Layla left through the back of the building, slipping out silently. Amir locked the door behind him, his heart heavy with the thought that he might never return to this safe place again. The city streets were eerie under the dim glow of street lamps. Their breath formed clouds in the freezing air as they walked quickly, heads down. Amir tried to act natural, but every shadow seemed alive. At one point, Layla froze, pulling him back against the wall of a building. Across the street, a man stood smoking, his eyes scanning the area too carefully. Amir's chest tightened. They waited until the man walked away before moving again. Finally, they reached the subway station. The warmth inside was a relief, but the crowded space made Amir uneasy. Too many eyes, too many chances of being recognized. Layla kept her head low, her scarf hiding her face. They boarded the train, sitting side by side, trying to look like two ordinary passengers, but the tension followed them. Every time the train stopped, Layla flinched. Once, a man in a dark coat entered their car, and her whole body stiffened. Amir whispered, "It's okay," but his own hands were clenched. The man got off at the next stop, leaving them shaken but still safe. The ride felt endless, but at last they reached their stop. They walked quickly through narrow streets until they found the office building where the reporter worked. The lights inside glowed warmly, but the glass door was locked. Amir rang the bell. A young assistant opened the door slightly, her eyes cautious. "Yes? We need to see Mr. Rahman," Amir said firmly. "It's urgent," the assistant hesitated. "He's very busy." Layla stepped forward, her voice shaking but determined. "Please, tell him it's about the charity investigation. He'll understand." The assistant's eyes widened slightly. She studied them for a moment before nodding. "Wait here." She closed the door and disappeared inside. Amir and Layla stood together in the cold, their breath rising in small clouds. Every second felt heavy. Finally, the door opened again and the assistant waved them in. The office was warm, lined with shelves of files and newspapers. At the far desk sat Mr. Rahman, the reporter. He was older than Amir expected, with silver in his hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He looked up as they entered, and when Layla placed the envelope on his desk, he leaned forward with intense focus. He opened it slowly, examining the photograph, the list of names, the documents inside. His expression grew serious, his eyes narrowing. Finally, he looked at them. "If this is real," he said in a low voice, "then you are both in great danger." Amir felt a chill even in the warm office. Layla's hands shook slightly, but she lifted her chin. "That's why we came to you. You're the only one who can make it public." Mr. Rahman nodded, but before he could say more, his phone rang. He answered it, and as he listened, his face went pale. His hand gripped the receiver tightly, and when he hung up, he looked at them with urgency. "They know you're here," he whispered. Amir's heart pounded. Layla gasped. The safe walls of the office suddenly felt like a trap. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm that was now closing in around them. The office felt warm, but Amir and Layla both shivered as if the icy storm outside had followed them in. Mr. Rahman, the reporter, sat behind his desk with the phone still in his hand. His eyes darted toward the door and windows as if invisible eyes were already watching them. His words were heavy with warning. "They know you're here." Amir's chest tightened. He had imagined danger before, but now it was no longer a thought, it was real and close. Layla gripped the edge of her chair, her knuckles white. She whispered, "What do we do now?" Mr. Rahman leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You can't leave the way you came in. If they followed you, they'll be waiting. I'll call someone I trust. But first I need to confirm these papers. If they are genuine, the whole city must know." He spread the documents across the desk, scanning each page quickly but carefully. His sharp eyes moved over the numbers, the accounts, the signatures. He muttered under his breath, pointing at certain details. "Yes, this connects. This matches what I suspected." He glanced up at them. "This is enough to start, but not enough to finish. I need witnesses. I need to talk to people who worked inside." Layla's voice trembled. "I know some. But they are afraid. If they speak, they will be targets too." Mr. Rahman nodded. "That's always the price. Truth has enemies." He reached for his phone again. But truth also has defenders. As he dialed, Amir walked to the window and carefully lifted the blinds. The street below was dark, lit only by a flickering lamp. A car was parked across the road, its engine running. He saw two figures inside, one holding a phone to his ear. Amir quickly dropped the blinds and turned back. His heart pounded. "They're outside," he whispered. Mr. Rahman's expression grew grim. "Then we don't have much time." The assistant entered the room, her face pale. "Sir, there are men downstairs asking questions. They said they're from a government office, but I don't believe them." Mr. Rahman stood, his voice firm. "Keep the doors locked. Don't let anyone in." He looked at Amir and Layla. "You two will have to move again, but not tonight. For now, you'll stay in the back room. Rest, eat. At dawn, I'll take you somewhere safer." Amir and Layla followed him into a small room behind the office. It was filled with old newspapers and dusty files, but it was hidden from outside view. Mr. Rahman left them there with blankets and promised to return soon. The hours passed slowly. The sound of voices drifted from the hallway, then silence, then the faint creak of footsteps. Layla sat close to Amir, her body trembling. She whispered, "I should never have knocked on your door. Now you're in danger too." Amir shook his head firmly. "You had no choice." "And I had a choice. I opened the door. I will not regret it." For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the rustle of papers as Layla held the envelope close. Then Amir added softly, "We'll face this together." Layla's eyes filled with tears, but she gave a small nod. By morning, the storm outside had calmed. The streets glistened with ice and snow under a pale sun. Mr. Rahman returned, his coat buttoned and his face set with determination. "I've confirmed enough to move forward," he said. "But once I publish, they will strike harder. You must be ready." He led them through a back exit into a narrow alley. They walked quickly, avoiding the main roads until they reached a modest apartment where one of his trusted colleagues lived. There they found temporary shelter. The next days were filled with tension. Mr. Rahman worked tirelessly, contacting old sources, double-checking every piece of information. Amir and Layla stayed hidden, moving only when necessary. At night they heard strange noises outside, the crunch of footsteps, the slam of a car door. Once they returned from a short walk to find a brick thrown through the window of the apartment below them. A note lay beside it with two chilling words, "Go back." Amir's nerves grew sharper with every sign of threat. He checked the locks 3 times before bed, kept a chair against the door and listened to every sound. Layla tried to stay calm, but her hands often shook as she held the envelope. She whispered, "They are getting closer." Still, Mr. Rahman pressed forward. Finally, one evening, he called them into the living room. His eyes gleamed with both exhaustion and triumph. "It's done," he said. "The story will go live tonight. By tomorrow morning, the whole country will know." Amir felt a wave of relief but also fear. Layla looked both hopeful and terrified. As the night news aired, they watched on a small television. The reporter's article appeared, complete with the documents and the photograph. Anchors spoke of corruption, missing money, and powerful names. The charity's leaders were shown denying everything, their faces pale with forced smiles. The news spread quickly, echoed across radio and social media. People began asking questions, but victory came with a price. Later that night, Amir's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "We know where you are." An hour later, they heard glass shatter downstairs. Shouts filled the street. Mr. Rahman quickly turned off the lights, whispering for everyone to stay quiet. Amir held his breath, his arm protectively across Layla's shoulders. The attackers didn't enter their apartment, but the warning was clear. The following day, things escalated. Amir's bicycle, chained outside, was found with its tires slashed. A neighbor reported seeing strangers lurking around the building. The fear pressed heavier than ever. "We cannot stay here," Mr. Rahman said firmly. "The truth is out, but it's not enough. They will fight back with money, with lawyers, with threats. We must find others to stand with us." Amir realized the fight was only beginning. The story was no longer about one snowy night or a knock on his door. It was about corruption hidden behind smiling faces, about ordinary people standing against powerful shadows. As evening fell, Amir sat by the window again, watching the snow begin to fall once more. The flakes danced quietly, beautiful and gentle, hiding the danger beneath. Layla sat beside him, holding the envelope close even though it had already been shared. She whispered, "This is not the end, is it?" Amir shook his head. "No, but it's a start." Just then there was a knock at the door. The sound was soft, almost polite, but it froze both of them in place. Amir rose slowly, his heart pounding. When he opened it, he found a plain envelope lying on the floor. Inside was a single cold object, a bullet, and a note with words written in neat letters. "Leave or lose everything." Amir closed the door, his hand trembling. Layla's eyes widened with fear, but Amir stood straighter than before. He had made his choice on that snowy night when he let her in, and there was no turning back now. The envelope with the cold object and the short warning lay on the table like a shadow in the room. Amir stared at it for a long time, his hand still trembling. Layla sat on the couch, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. Her face was pale and her lips moved silently as though she was praying. Mr. Rahman stood near the window, his jaw set, his eyes sharp with anger. The message was clear. The people they had exposed would not back down without a fight. Amir finally broke the silence. "They won't stop. Even now, after the truth is out, they are still trying to scare us." Mr. Rahman nodded. "That's what happens when powerful men feel their walls breaking. They fight harder, but remember, they are not untouchable. Once the truth begins to spread, it cannot be buried again." Layla looked at him with frightened eyes. "But what about us? They know our faces. They know where we are." Her words hung heavy in the air. Amir moved closer to her, speaking gently. "You are not alone anymore. I opened my door that night because you needed hope. We will not give up now." For the next few days, the danger around them grew sharper. More articles appeared in the newspapers. More voices joined the conversation. Some people came forward quietly at first, sharing their own stories about the charity and its leaders. A few brave former workers sent emails to Mr. Rahman, offering evidence they had hidden for years. Slowly, the walls of silence began to crack, but the threats also grew louder. Strangers followed Amir in the street. Someone left another note under the apartment door. A neighbor warned them that two men had been asking questions about Layla. Every step felt like walking on thin ice. Mr. Rahman finally made a decision. "We must take you to the authorities," he said firmly. "Not the local police, but higher officials. With the documents and the witnesses, they cannot ignore this anymore." Layla shook her head. "They will find me even there. They have friends everywhere." Amir placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Not everywhere. There are still good people. If you stay hidden forever, they win. If you face them, you take away their power." It was not an easy choice, but at last Layla agreed. With Mr. Rahman's help, they met with officials from a federal agency known for fighting corruption. The meeting was held in a quiet building, away from the eyes of the city. Layla handed over the envelope, her voice trembling but steady as she told her story. She described the missing money, the secret accounts, the threats, and the night she had knocked on Amir's door. The officials listened carefully, writing notes and asking questions. They promised protection, but Amir could see the doubt in Layla's eyes. Promises were words, and words could be broken, yet for the first time there was also a spark of hope. Weeks passed, and slowly the tide began to turn. More witnesses stepped forward. More documents surfaced. The leaders of the charity were called in for questioning. Their faces, once proud and untouchable, now appeared on the evening news under harsh headlines. Lawsuits were filed, accounts were frozen, and their empire began to crumble. During this time, Amir and Layla were moved to a safe location. It was a small town far from the city, surrounded by fields and quiet streets. There were no dark cars waiting at corners, no strangers asking questions. For the first time in months, Layla slept through the night without waking in fear. Amir felt the tightness in his chest ease, though he remained cautious. One evening, as they sat outside the small house, watching the sunset paint the sky, Layla turned to Amir. Her eyes were softer now, filled not with fear but with gratitude. "If you hadn't opened the door that night," she said quietly, "I wouldn't be here now. You saved my life." Amir shook his head. "I only opened the door. You had the courage to keep fighting." Layla smiled faintly. "But your choice gave me the chance. Sometimes one act of kindness is enough to change everything." The months rolled on, and the investigation grew stronger. Mr. Rahman continued to publish updates, keeping the truth alive. Eventually, the leaders of the charity were brought to trial. Their confident voices cracked under evidence and witnesses. The story that had begun on a snowy night in front of Amir's door ended in a courtroom where justice finally spoke louder than threats. When the verdict came, declaring the guilty responsible for their crimes, Amir and Layla sat together watching the news. Neither of them cheered. They only sat in silence, letting the weight of the journey settle in their hearts. Life after that was not simple. Layla had to rebuild from the ground. She chose a new name, a new job, and a quiet life in the small town. Amir visited often, bringing books from his shop, sharing tea and quiet evenings. Their bond grew not from romance or grand gestures, but from trust and survival. They had shared fear, danger, and courage, and that connection could never be broken. One winter evening, nearly a year after that first night, snow began to fall again. Amir visited Layla's small home. She stood at the window, watching the flakes drift down gently. For a moment she was silent, lost in thought. Then she turned to him and whispered, "I will never forget that night. The snow, the cold, the fear, and the door that opened when I thought all doors were closed." Amir smiled softly. "Neither will I." The snow fell outside, covering the earth in white silence, but inside there was warmth. Not just from the fire, but from the knowledge that kindness had defeated fear, and truth had survived lies. The storm had passed, but its memory would always remind them both of the power of one simple choice, of a knock on a door, and the courage to answer it. And so, their story closed not with loud triumph, but with quiet strength. A life saved, a truth revealed, and two souls forever changed on a snowy night when desperation met compassion.